Hey guys, welcome to the Whole Lot of Jesus podcast. This is a podcast where we talk all about testimonies. I'm really excited for y'all to hear this marriage story of restoration. We have with us Anne and Brad. They are from Southern Indiana, and they have been married for a total of 32 years. But as we get into their story, you're going to see that it's kind of broken into two parts. So they have 25 years in the first part and then 7 years in the second part. And how are y'all doing?
Good.
Doing good.
Good.
Yeah, doing good.
Good. Okay. So I always ask this question with every guest, and it is, what is the coolest way you've seen God move either in your life or in someone else's? You both can answer, or one person can answer. It doesn't matter.
I think this whole interview
Will be that.
will be that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just, seeing very specific answers to prayer, kind of miraculous things at times, So, yeah.
Because I was going to say, he's my biggest, seeing what God did in his life is just so, so wonderful. And God's kindness to me too through our story. But that's definitely just one of the most fantastic things we've gotten to see.
Yeah, that's awesome. So Anne and I want to give them a quick summary of how we met. Anne and I met at Realm Makers, which is a Christian writing conference for fantasy and sci-fi, kind of that genre of fiction. And it was last year, so it was 2023, right? Yes.
Yeah.
It was our first year. We had never gone. So that was our first time going, and we just connected. And then as the sessions went on, you're going to these different sessions, so you're seeing a lot of people, and we would just catch up if we were in the same session. And towards the end, I think it was like the last day, we somehow got to talking about, like, for instance, my parents' story of how they restored their marriage. My mom had cheated on my dad, and instead of getting a divorce, they decided to work it out. And then that opened up the conversation for you to bring up how you and Brad also had kind of a different but similar story when it came to restoring marriage. And so that was a really cool connection that we had. I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah. No, yeah, it was just neat to connect in the Lord about a lot of things. And that was really one of them, really special one.
Yes. And Anne helped me so much with my pitch. I remember I had never pitched before, and I just remember you like helping give me tips for what to say and different things. So you were very helpful in that area too.
Oh, cool.
Yes, ma'am. But let's dive into it. So tell us a little bit about yourselves, how y'all met, and then what your married life was like at the beginning, like the beginning stages and all of that.
Kind of a different beginning. We met on CU's campus, right?
Mhm.
And I was in a band, we were playing there, and the sound man was in the back, of course, and Anne was standing back there, and he heard her singing along, all right,
Mhm.
and asked her to join the band.
Yeah. And really, it's not that I have a great voice, but it was really fun to be asked. And then he was in the band, and we pretty quickly just really connected, and it was a very I would say a really Christ-centered connection that we made. We ended up joining this band, kind of evolved into another band. And we toured with them on a school bus right after we got married on the West Coast. And So, played in all these parks and a biker's wedding and various things like that. So,
That's really cool.
The first year or 6 months to a year of our marriage was on a bus.
on a school bus. Yeah,
Wow.
with lots of people, but it was cool.
Yeah, I'm sure that had its perks and challenges.
Yeah.
We have good friends that are college ministers. They do college ministry. And they did this like really intensive internship their first year of marriage.
Oh,
And they for the college ministry, but they said like you really didn't have time, just y'all two, and you were staying up so late and you had to get up so early. And they're looking back, they were like, yeah, it was pretty intense. Just because you want that time with just you and your spouse when you first get married. And it was a very intensive program. So they didn't always get that. So I'm sure y'all can relate to
yeah.
that. So how long before y'all started having kids? Was your marriage like, would you consider your marriage thriving? How many years was it just um looking back, like, the honeymoon stage, the things like that?
Yeah. Well, we had two sons within the first about 10 years of married life. And I would say that, up until the last maybe couple of years before Brad left, I felt like we were very, you know, doing well. I mean, we had our ups and downs, but very close. Now, I don't know. I think in his inner life, there was more struggle probably. But maritally, we seem to be, doing fine. We went to church together, served in church together, were in Bible studies, all of that kind of thing. And so what would you say, honey? Because you were experiencing something inside that was growing as a
Well, yeah, and I was, not as close to God by any means as I was in the beginning. But I tried to hide that and kind of, talk the talk, but I wasn't walking the walk at all. I knew how to be a Christian, I knew how to mimic them, and I knew all what they say and how to pray and all that, but it wasn't, it was real, but it wasn't. I was drifting big time.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. I know my parents can say the same thing which we'll kind of get into, of just like drifting slowly. And like life gets busy. Like they talk about how you're running around with your kids and your job and you're just like going through life, and you wake up 2 years later looking at one another like, we haven't stared at one another in the face and asked, how are you in forever, or things like that. And did you ever anticipate, like, were there any red flags or signs that you saw leading up to Brad leaving? Was it very unexpected?
Um, by the time that he left, it wasn't unexpected. Um, I was definitely feeling, I could tell he wasn't doing well. He had gone into quite a deep midlife type depression. He kind of stopped even wanting to go to service church at all. He stopped wanting me to ever mention God at all. And like I remember just an example of that, our son, who would have been about 13 to 15 in this time period, asking a question in the car about the Lord, something about God. And I just thought, I can't answer, I can't go there because it will but our son didn't realize that that's where his dad was, but I felt he would blame me if that was talked about. So that was really a very hard time, honestly. And I spent a lot of time in prayer and a lot of time just clinging to God because I felt like things weren't going well. And then at one point, when he was really depressed, he just said, I think we should separate. And and that was, of course, a blow, not highly unexpected, but a blow. And we kind of cobbled things together. I mean, we just kind of kept going. And I'm trying to condense everything that happened. But we had a kind of a bad experience going to a counselor who, and I know that counseling can be good, but our experience wasn't good. It was just it just was left me feeling so unhopeful and gave Kim no real encouragement. Brad, no, sorry, if you could edit that, because I call him Kim.
It's
And
okay.
yeah, okay, Brad's anyway. So but it just gave Brad no encouragement to stay in the marriage. So anyway, so then a little while after that, I found out there was another woman. At the time that he talked about separating, there wasn't, but there was no one else. There was no one else when we were talking about separating. But and that of course was a wound and a shock, not as shocking as it would have been had everything seemed fine, and everything didn't seem fine. So though it was still hurtful and surprising, it wasn't like a major shock, but it was horrible.
Yeah.
And at that point, it was kind of like, from my point of view, well, I just want you to decide what you're going to do, because I had spent by then probably a couple of years really praying for him, for our marriage. I was kind of tired. I didn't I didn't want to give up on the marriage. I wanted us to stay together. But at the same time, I was like, it's kind of in your court.
Guys, so y'all have probably seen the Leaning In planner and devotional being advertised on here. We are about to open pre-orders, and if you pre-order it before the launch date, which is November 1st, you get some goodies. You're going to get a signed copy from myself. You're going to get a personal note, and I am really going to emphasize that this personal note goes beyond just me writing a note to you. I'm really going to pray about what you need to hear and just give you some encouragement through that note. And then you also will receive a free bookmark with a quote from the book and a sticker, which it's really small in this image, but I'm so excited to show you when I have them in. They are ordered. I'm just waiting for them to get here, and I will be posting about the bookmarks and the sticker when I receive them. You're also going to get all of this in a cute, customized box that I am excited about. And so this is, again, the pre-order goodies. So when I open pre-orders, be sure to order this in advance if you would like this goodie stuff. You can always get the sticker and the bookmark after pre-orders, but you will have to pay for them, whereas this, you're getting them for free. So be looking out. Make sure to follow me on social media so you have all the updates on that. And if you haven't heard and you're new, our Leaning In planner and devotional is really about helping you grow in your faith with the Lord, helping you overcome strongholds, helping you overcome just the lies of the enemy, the wages of sin, and clinging to God for help. And so every month we have a devotional. I also include scripture declarations in the back with a ton of topics to help you if you're struggling with anxiety or maybe suicide, or maybe a lack of purpose, or sexual sin, or addictions. There are all those scripture declarations to help you declare God's word over yourself. And so this is going to be available November 1st, so be sure to be looking out for that. So I want to ask you, Brad, what were some thought patterns, temptations, and mindsets that were filtering through your mind that led up to you deciding to leave? I know for my mom, leading up, they talked about priorities. They talked about how with my mom, kids came first, and making sure my brother and I were provided for and had everything. And then my dad was very much like wanting to provide for the family. And so his work ended up coming first, and it drifted them apart. And so my mom found herself in a very desperate place of, I'm being pulled in 50 directions. I don't feel seen. But I know it can be different reasons of like what was going through your mind. I just want the viewers to understand of like, I don't think you just decide one day, oh, I'm going to leave my spouse. Oh, I'm going to cheat on my spouse. I think it's a process of mindset, different things that happen internally before it happens externally.
So the question was, what was going on inside?
Yeah, like,
Well, I had had an affair earlier, and we made it through that. And I had a job where I was gone every other week. And so it was easy to meet people. And so there was that like temptation. I wasn't close to God, so I really didn't feel any obligation to God. And what I felt for Anne was just, it was mostly, we were at the point where I didn't want to hear. She talks about God a lot. And I was just tired of hearing it. I wanted to get away from that. And the only thing I thought, well, wait till the kids are gone, for their sake. Well, that was ridiculous.
Can I just ask, do you feel like I was talking about God too much, or do you feel you were ultra sensitive to?
Stand by while we have a counseling session.
It's okay.
No, I mean, like today, I don't think she is. She's different. But
okay,
like I say, it's like, thing with, we just heard this the other day, the thing with Israel, people don't hate Jews. They hate God.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what was happening there. I didn't hate God, but wasn't interested in him at all. And I felt like earlier on in my Christian walk, something I like almost immediately after I became a Christian that really took the wind out of my sails and really hurt my faith. So, and it was kind of downhill from there. It really, I lost my my faith in people, Christians, and it just wasn't what I anticipated. I thought Christians were all, perfect. And anyway, so and then the other part of it is if you talk to anybody, if you're considering leaving your spouse, you can find somebody to tell you what you want to hear.
Yeah.
Some people say, no, you shouldn't do that. Okay, well, let me ask this person. Well, sure, it's okay. Okay, well, okay, I'll go with you. And then about the kids, you always hear, well, kids are just going to get their bents back. It's not a big deal. And that's not true. That was a huge lie. or misinformation. My kids took it really hard.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I know something that you brought up. So you had, just to clarify, you had, before you left, were there two cheatings? Like you had one early on and then y'all worked it out and then later it happened again. Something
They
that,
were both
oh, wait,
pretty close together though.
oh,
Not,
they were.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Something that I guess being in college, maybe right before I got married, we were being like told is if you don't handle your like lust or if you don't handle your issues before you get married, don't think that marriage just like makes it go away. And I honestly feel like before you get married, you think that. Like you think, okay, once I get married, like my struggle with temptation is going to be gone because we're able to, clearly have sex and like yeah, y'all get what I'm saying. So like and even in Briston and I's relationship, before we got married, we shared, our struggles, and it doesn't even have to be with lust. It can be just insecurities in general and temptations in general. But when you get married, it like if you don't handle it, it comes out. And that's something like we've had to walk through. And so just I don't know, you were just mentioning that, and I think it's very important for the viewers to know like marriage just doesn't, I know they say happily ever after, but your temptations are going to come out in your marriage even though you might not think that they are. But thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that. Do you want to add anything before we go on?
Yeah, and another huge part of it, I think, was pornography.
Yes.
Again, that can seem innocent enough when you first start. It never gets better. It never kind of just fades away. It gets worse. And I know this conversation is probably not built around that, but there are, it was an addiction that nothing really satisfies. Just like any addiction, you take a drug that works for a while. Now you need something stronger that works for a while. So there's never good, never good into it.
Yeah, thank you for
If
sharing.
you just let it go, if you just let it run its course, it's not running in a good place.
Yes, that's really good. I heard a pastor, because like one thing that in the church, sometimes we do bad about explaining to like kids is, they say like don't have sex before marriage or like don't watch pornography, and those are good things, but it's also, for instance, whenever I told my mom like I had lost my virginity, I really liked her response because she said, your desire is not necessarily bad. And so, but she said the way it's like coming out, I'm doing bad at explaining this, but she explained it very much better. But the way you're expressing that desire is not fruitful. And that's something that like you talk about pornography. There was a pastor talking about how like your desire for intimacy and dopamine and the things like that is not necessarily bad, but the way it's being executed. And he talked about how actually like with pornography, it's not like yes, it's lust, but he talked about variety and he talked about how you're like because it's different people, so and he talked about how the danger of that with marriage is like you have one person, and the scary thing about pornography is, or affairs, because it can probably cause you to want to like cheat with multiple people, is your issue is you're not satisfied with like one. It's like a variety thing.
Right.
And that was very interesting to hear because we always, hear about like the issue with lust, and he brought up the issue with variety and like being satisfied with being content with one. Okay, so we are also providing the free goodies for our Be Generous devotional, which also comes out November 1st. And this is the same thing. It's a planner and devotional, but it emphasizes how to biblically handle your finances, how to steward generosity through your service, through your time, through your skill sets, how to serve different areas of your life generously. And so it's the same thing. Every month we have devotionals, and these are our pre-order goodies where you're going to get a sticker with a quote, a bookmark, and I'm going to do a bundle. So if you order both the Leaning In and Be Generous, you'll get them together. And this, again, needs to be ordered before November 1st, the launch date, if you want these goodies. And I will be posting about them soon. But really, if you just want to learn how to manage your finances, if you're just stressed out when it comes to your finances, you don't know what to do, you don't know where to turn, but you want to make a change in 2025, I highly recommend getting this planner and devotional. I use a lot of resources that financial advisors and really money people use. I use Dave Ramsey as a huge inspiration. And so we're going to talk about that. So Anne, tell us your experience with having him leave. And were you angry at God? Confused? Did leading up to him leaving, like, how did that work? Was it just one day he just like left? Were there conversations and then he left? And then kind of what was your mental experience? And how did you keep your faith going through this time?
Well, I feel like, for one thing, and this is a good encouragement for all of us, is that, you know, gripping onto God through whatever you're facing is the best way to prepare to face something hard. You know, later on, the best way to prepare to obey him 10 years from now is to obey him today. You know, so I think that the Lord, while he was going through this time of depression and distance from God, God was really present in my life. I mean, I was seeking him just so voraciously, you know. And then, you know, when I found out that he was having the affair, pretty much he said he was going to leave. And not even so much, well, it was just, he was just so depressed, so done with life. He thought, he said, maybe I can find happiness somewhere. And so the hardest part of that by far was telling, one of our sons was in college, but one of our sons was in high school. And telling him that the next morning was just the worst thing, I think, probably ever in my life. He was so close to his dad, and I think perhaps I hadn't prepared him enough, or we hadn't, for the fact that his dad wasn't doing real well. And so for him, it was terrible. He had a sudden, he told us later, splitting headache, and his nose, he just started bleeding from his nose. And I mean, it was just this visceral, physical reaction that was just terrible. And then, so then after that crisis moment, for about a year, I would say, we were going through the process of him moving out, moving in later with the other woman, filing for divorce, all these different things, going to court, you know. So early in that period, I wouldn't want to underestimate the fact that, I mean, it was very, very painful, very, very heart-rending. I felt betrayed by, you know, my closest friend and partner. I never felt angry with God. I definitely felt bewildered. I felt like, I have prayed so much, Lord, why? And I've loved marriage, and I've sought to be I just thought, why are you letting this happen? You know, why are you not answering my prayers? But even in that why question, I didn't feel a doubt of him. I felt bewildered. That's really a good word. And so pretty early on, I remember what I was doing. I was vacuuming these brown couches that we had. And so it was a really unpoetic moment, but I just felt this sense of this voice coming to me that said, is there a God? Is there a God? And of course, that's not because I was lacking faith that there was a God, but it was specific to, can God do anything about this? And I just began, in fact, in the story that we together wrote about our story, that's how I open it, was, is there a God? And basically, I felt like the Lord was leading me to something I did not expect, which was persevere for your marriage. Don't give up praying for him to return first to the Lord, primarily to the Lord, and also to you and to your family. And that was so contrary to even what I was hearing in Christian circles. Not to be hard on people, but just people were encouraging, even in my Christian circles, move on. Maybe there'll be somebody else. I mean, it was kind of unheard of by me at that time, to persevere when this person has left you and they're moving in, and it was like, oh. But so through that year and on beyond it, I felt the Lord was just revealing things to me so powerfully. Like, I felt this desire to stand for my marriage, but I remember praying specifically, Lord, I need instruction. I need instruction. That was the word I used. And within 24 hours, I had been loaned a Bible study that was so good about faith. And the biggest thing is, well, I'll tell the other lesser thing. I saw an article in Dear Abby, the old advice columnist, 3 letters about restored marriages, which was just weird. And then the biggest exclamation point kind of thing was that I was going to the website to look for this ministry that was Pure Life Ministry, something like that. And so the ministry that came up was Rejoice Marriage Ministry. So the only word they had in common was ministry. And how many thousands of ministries are there? And I clicked on it, and it just had this manifesto of, I will not back down, slow down, give up, sit down until my marriage is restored. And so I began getting their daily devotionals. I really highly recommend them. And that was my instruction. And so from there, just fast forward, it was then 10 years before he one time in there near the end of the 10 years, he said, I wish you would stop praying for me. You remember that?
Yeah, because things have gotten from bad to worse. Boredom.
So, but all, and so just one more thing I'll add on that is all during that 10 years, this was so a mark of God that things just kept getting worse. I mean, circumstantially, there was no hope on the horizon circumstantially. And yet, and I've never been one of these people, oh, God will do a miracle. I believe he will do miracles, but I never had that kind of faith to pray for healing. I think it's wonderful to do that. But I'm just saying that wasn't my gift. My spiritual gifting wasn't in that kind of thing. But I just began to believe God's going to do this. He's going to reconcile our marriage. I don't know how, I don't know when, but my faith that he would do that increased as circumstances were just looking completely impossible. And that, to me, I thought, Lord, this must be you, because there is nothing humanly that should give hope.
Okay, guys, so the last ad that I have for us on this episode is we are looking for coaches under our Stewards of Faith to help mentor and coach people who are really after growing in their relationship with the Lord. We have these 7 different categories, as y'all know, and so we're looking for a coach for each category. And really, our heart's desire is to help mentor and disciple the younger generation, and to help them learn how to set goals that partner with God as they mature in their faith. And so if you are passionate about one of these 7 areas and you would like to grow in your leadership, in your discipleship skills, to disciple others, we are all called to make disciples. And so really, it doesn't mean that you have to have everything together. It doesn't mean that you have to know everything. We're going to provide leadership development to help pour into you as you pour into others. But this is an online community, and you will receive some commission as a part of doing this, because we want to value your knowledge and your wisdom and your time, and we want to honor that. And so if you're interested in becoming a coach and helping disciple others, please reach out to us. Please comment. Please let me know. That is so good. That reminds me of Abraham when it says he was strengthened. It's something like the longer he went, the more his faith grew, and he was strengthened, or his faith was strengthened.
There's that one line, against all hope, Abraham in hope believed.
Yes.
In Romans 4, it says that, and that was one of my things that I clinged on to.
Yes, that's really good. Y'all's story also reminds me of Job, because I was reading James, and it says, blessed is the one who remains steadfast. And he uses Job as an example, and just like what you had to endure, and how like you never threw in the towel and you never gave up. And that's something that now, I think it's been 7 or 8 years. Well, yeah, 7 or 8 years since my parents' affair. So it's almost been a decade, and they have started counseling people who are having marital problems or have had an affair or whatever. And they've noticed that it's hard. Like, I'm sure when y'all go through y'all's healing process, it wasn't like, oh, we're just fine and dandy and we're just back to normal. They had to endure a lot, and there was a lot of fighting and a lot of, bickering and just trying to like figure out each other again, this new normal, if you will. And they talk about how when you're restoring something and healing something, how they've noticed our human nature is so easy to just like throw in the towel and give up and say, this is hard, I don't like this. But I love what my dad says, because my dad's like, giving up is hard. Like, it's not going to be easy either way. You give up on your marriage, it's going to be hard. You restore your marriage, it's going to be hard. Like, you're never going to avoid the hardness of whatever decision you make. So 10 years. And then you answered question 6. So God kind of told you, actually, I remember at the writing conference, you told me, you said, you never got the peace to remarry or move on. And you kind of went into that, how God was like, I want you to pray for your marriage and pray for it to be restored. That is something so contradicting to culture and even church, what you're saying. And so, Brad, what brought you back? What was the shifting point, I don't know, turning back? Was it an encounter? Did someone say something? I'm sure it was a process.
Okay, so after I left Anne, I ended up marrying another woman. And this is one of those things where, we said in her faith, there wasn't anything like saying that I was getting closer to coming back.
Yeah.
It was all things that were, this is definitely a step in the wrong direction. So that was one of the steps. And then I divorced her. And anyway, I was living by myself in a nearby town from where we lived. And anyway, I got in trouble with the law, and I ended up going to prison. Something I wasn't accustomed to in the least. I've never been in trouble before, but I did, and I went to prison, and there was about a year between the time I was arrested and the time I was sentenced. And so during that time, I kind of sought God a little bit, but just for help out of this situation. It wasn't, I want to come back because I love you and I'm giving my life to you. It was, yeah, I just need help.
Yeah.
And those prayers weren't answered in the way that I anticipated. So I ended up going to prison. And while I was there, I did still pray a lot, but again, God was silent. And I remember one time I was in my cell that I had been in for probably a couple of weeks. I moved around a lot. I was in 4 different prisons. But
in the whole process of getting.
Yeah. And I get emotional.
No, you're fine.
Anyway, so I was in my cell and I was crying out to God. And I said, am I not your son anymore? And when when I prayed that, my eyes were closed. I opened my eyes and I saw something in my cell that somebody, excuse me, had written on the wall. So it had been there for the 2 weeks, but I'd never seen it before. And it just said, no. So that was, that was kind of a low point where I thought, okay, if I'm not, then it's over. So anyway, I went from place to place, and it was really hard, as you can imagine. And I had one contact, which was one of my boys. I'm supposed to have 10. They gave me 1, and so he was the only one I could call. And so I called him, and I made the mistake of telling him, since he was the only one I had to talk to, what was going on. Just all the people that were, out in the yard coming on gurneys, just beat to a pulp, and lots of threats against me, and just a lot of bad things that I told him about. And so finally I said, Dad, I can't do this anymore. So, and I understand that now. But he said, I want you to read Malachi 2, was it 2:13-16. And by this time I was reading the Bible sometimes 8 hours a day. What else are you gonna do?
Did they like how did you read the Bible in prison? Sorry, I'm not very familiar with.
They have them there.
Oh, okay.
Actually, my son had sent me one too.
Oh,
Yeah. So I was reading a lot. I was praying. There were other Christian men there. But yeah, it was still kind of not good. Anyway, so he said, Dad, I want you to read this, Malachi 2:13-16. And that was it.
we pulled it up so that before we got on, so we could read it, because this, you asked if it was gradual. It really wasn't. His return to the Lord was pretty sudden, and it was really this passage that God used like that, dividing to divide bone from marrow. So
it says, another thing you do, you flood the Lord's altar with tears. You weep and wail because he no longer pays attention to your offerings or accepts them with pleasure from your hands. You ask why? It is because the Lord is acting as the witness between you and the wife of your youth, because you have broken faith with her. She is your partner, the wife of your marriage covenant. So that answered the question of why God wasn't hearing me. I had broken covenant with Anne, and I had not. God was telling me, this is the issue. And I had thought, and I had offered bargains to God, deals like, okay, well, I will do this if you do this. But I really am not, I don't want to go back to Anne. And again, it's not because Anne was this horrible person, it's because I still didn't want anything with God. So at this point, God said, I'm not going to listen to your prayers. Because, and there's another part that says, you've acted treacherously toward her.
oh, and then it says, just guard yourself in your spirit. Do not break faith with the wife of your youth. I hate divorce, says the God of Israel. Just to finish that little part. But yeah, there's one part about, yeah, it's a really wonderful passage. But
so that really spoke to me. And it wasn't like just reading through the Bible and through that verse. It's really hit me hard. And after I had read it, and this may sound kind of weird, I don't know, but it's true. I closed my eyes and I saw very vividly. Some people may call it a vision, I don't know. But it was a very vivid picture of a snake, silver snake, swimming in a silver bowl filled with liquid silver. And he had that verse, Malachi, written on. So, and then it went away. And so I thought, well, that's significant. I think that means something.
I don't know what, but
yeah. So, so the next day, I thought, well, I've got to figure out what silver means, because obviously. And the next time I opened my Bible to look, it was in.
We went back, we decided to finish Malachi. Remember,
right.
We didn't know where to read, so you thought, well,
right.
I'll just finish Malachi.
Right.
Little.
And just right after that, it talks about, God says, and I will sit as a refiner of fine silver. And and it will be something like, it will be
better
for you as it was in days of old.
Mm-hmm.
And that told me, my days of old were being very close to God. So
I was going to try to find it. For he is like a refiner's fire. He shall sit as a refiner and purifier of silver, and he will purge them as he does gold and silver, that they may offer unto the Lord an offering of righteousness. So that silver vision, then the next day he reads this, and this explains why that vivid vision of silver was there.
So,
oh, I'm sorry, Annie. Then it just goes on. I was looking for that verse, but anyway, where it says it'll be better than it was even in the past. But,
so anyway, that was my point where I turned. And so I called John and I said, God wants our family back together. And so that's when we began, working on restoration.
he wrote me a letter, and he called John, and John called me at work and said, Mom, I don't even know what, it was like John sounded like a deer in headlights. And he says, Dad called and he wants our family to get back together. And I just sat there. We were both stunned and I was sitting in work and just, I don't know. It was just an incredible moment. And I felt confident, positive, I will say, that this was not just I just knew this is God. This is God doing this. This is his answer to my years of prayer. And I knew that the road ahead would be hard, but I thought, I am just going to rejoice for the next, period of time. I'm not going to even think about how hard it's going to be. I'm just going to rejoice that God has heard my cry, And that verse even went through my mind about, tell her that her hard service is over. And it was just, just unbelievable, really, and unbelievable to our son. And to us, it was just like, oh my word, it was such a, like Paul on the road to Damascus kind of miraculous revelation from this scripture, which, I'm sorry, did I interrupt? You go ahead. I was just going to tell them. Well, I was just going to say that one part about the verse just before we leave it is that I had shared that with John, our son, right after his dad went into prison, because I was familiar with that passage. And so Brad and I were talking while he was waiting. Kleenex. Brad and I were in communication during that year before he went to prison, and he was asking me, he says, I cry out to God, why doesn't he answer? And I knew this passage that, but I didn't feel I was in a position to share it with him. It would seem self-serving, and I just didn't feel a freedom from the Lord to share it. But I shared it with our son, and then our son shared it with him. And sure enough, I just, all those passages that talk about the word of God being powerful, I'm like, we have witnessed that. We have seen the power of the living word. So go ahead, honey, where were you?
So, after that, God really began to speak to me again. And just, reading the Bible and different things. One thing that happened, I was I was in my cell, and a guard brought a letter to my cell, which they don't do.
Okay.
There's a mail call. They come to the front of the room. Everybody comes out. You hear your name. You go get your mail. He brought this letter to my cell. Well, moments before that, maybe a minute, I had been having a bad day, particularly bad. And I just prayed for God to send an angel, which I had never have prayed that before, and I never have since, but angel means messenger. So here comes this message. And it was from a woman that was a couple, she was the woman part of
The wife.
couple that we knew. Like 15 years ago, we hadn't been in contact.
I had been a little bit, but he hadn't been really at all because we've been apart.
So it was a letter from her, and she said, I had a dream, and it was so vivid that I believe it was from God somehow. And she said I was flying, and
That he was fine.
right. And I was flying through a storm, and it was really bad, and the plane was going down.
And she was staying.
And yeah, she was from her watching it in her dream saying, pull up, pull up. Well,
pull up,
Anyway, the plane ended up crashing into the water, and she was looking around in her dream for me, and I had to come up out of the water. I was still alive, and was just found something to hold on to. And she said, that was it. Excuse me, that was it. But she said, I dreamed it twice, same dream.
Oh, wow.
So that was really, that went along with the Malachi that said, well, let me just finish that. So another interesting thing is she addressed it wrong. So I don't know how long that letter was floating around, but it came
Right
just
at
at the moment that I prayed. And I knew that,
God had answered.
So then the next time my Bible opened up to Genesis 40 or something, and talks about the dreams of
Joseph.
Yeah. So Joseph was interpreting dreams for Pharaoh. And in that, is the story of the lean cows and the fat cows and the good corn and the bad corn. And in that, Joseph said, both of the dreams mean the same thing. It's just that the reason you had two is because God will surely bring it to pass.
God will.
Oh, yes, say that again.
God will surely bring it to pass.
Oh, okay.
So
Okay.
that's why you had two dreams, even though they meant the same thing. So
she had this dream twice, and in it, he does crash and burn, but he does crawl, and he does live and come to safety. So it was just terrifically reassuring, wasn't it? It was just.
But just lots of answered prayers, and God really speaking to me through his word. Again, which he hadn't for so long, And just to be clear, neither Anne or I were really crazy about the idea of being together. again. Now, let me just say that the reason we got back together was because it was the right thing to do. And I knew myself, I thought, well, if you do what God, if you're obedient to the word, then God will work out the details, you know. And I thought, okay, if we do this, even though I, you know, don't really love her, I believe that God will restore that love, which he did.
Mm.
So there is, you know, it's not just, well, like we've heard so many people say, well, do you love them? You know, do you still care about them? That's not the issue. You, you made a covenant with your spouse that God himself witnessed. And that's important. God doesn't take that lightly. So
That's really good.
And I felt on my side, my commitment to Brad had never wavered. I mean, when I say never wavered, it's not like it wasn't hard, you know, but that bottom line commitment hadn't wavered. But the feeling part, you know, I hadn't hardly been with him for years. And I mean, we would be with each other a little bit hither and yon for something to do with our sons or, you know, but that emotional, you know, oh, part that had been wrung out, you know, but I had never stopped praying. And so when he wrote this letter and said, would you be willing to get me together? I'm like, oh, what do you think I've been praying for all these years? No, I'm just kidding, but not really, but you know, my tone, I'm kidding. But anyway, it was just such a wonderful answer to prayer. And then as this ministry had instructed you, you don't stop praying. You pray all the more when you begin to get back together. And we've seen God just continue to answer prayer. And we don't have time, we won't go into it, but the answers to prayer that he experienced in prison, he mentioned the one about this beautiful, perfectly timed messenger. But he had so many other just beautiful experiences of God blessing and answering prayer and doing miracles. It was amazing. And I had other things that we don't have time to share about ways that the Lord would direct and just make manifest his plan and purposes. So we just rejoice in it all so much. And we just so want to, you know, we'll glorify him above all and give him praise and honor. He is worthy of any sacrifice you make to obey him. He's worthy. And he is the great restorer. He answers prayers. He does miracles. Don't give up, persevere. You know, those are just some of the quick things that we would share, right, sweetie? The others.
well, another kind of miraculous thing I think was, you know, when you get out of prison, it's hard to find a job. It's nearly impossible. And I had been making six figures, and now of course I lost my job. And I just thought we are just going to be dirt poor, or I'm going to be dirt poor, you know, as I was thinking before and after. And because how am I going to make money?
Yeah.
And I use pretty much all of my savings for lawyers and this and that. And anyway, so now, I mean, not to brag, but just except for on God, that we now own two houses free and clear, and really no debt, you know. And it's like, how did that happen?
We don't even know. We don't even know how God did all this, but Yeah, he's been so faithful. He was so faithful to me during the lean years when Brad was gone. I look back and think of things, a new furnace that was needed, a new roof. I don't even know how I paid for those. I really don't. I mean, some things I know the kindness of many people and God's kindness through all. But anyway, we don't want to just talk at you forever, but we're just so,
No,
it's so good to talk
yeah,
about what God has done.
yeah, I love, y'all have an incredible story. So you wrote a book
Yes.
called Beauty from Ashes. And is it just kind of what y'all explained going through how the Lord restored um your marriage and what y'all went through and kind of give them
Yeah.
a synopsis of what the book is about?
Okay. Well, here we have it here because the Malachi passage was in it. There it is.
Oh
So,
yeah.
that we just quickly Brad said, "Do we need the Malachi passage?" And I had the book right here, and I'm like, "Oh, I know where it is in the book." So, um, but the first like bulk of it is from my perspective what I was going through, and just really remarkable, meaningful ways that the Lord spoke to me about prayer, about spiritual warfare, about being in the Word, about waiting on God, about perseverance, just lots of things. And it's written primarily from my journal entries that are just lifted from those old journals, and then just trying to be honest about the raw feelings, and then the beautiful ways that God ministered, and especially, especially his word, and just how powerful and meaningful it was. And then the last section is oh, okay. Well, it's then in the last whole section is from his journals
Okay.
when he was in prison, and just story after story of God's remarkable, I mean, just being cornered by a man and ending up having this long spiritual discussion, and just, I don't know, just amazing things that God did, practically getting a hug from a skinhead that had wanted to kill him the day before, just really neat stories. So that last part is his story,
Okay.
his story. And then it ends with our remarriage back on our wedding date. We were married in 1979 and then remarried in 2017 on the same date.
Wow.
And in the same church. And I couldn't wear the same wedding dress, but we have the veil was split in two and wrapped around the columns, and then our sons were his groomsmen, and their wives were my bridesmaids.
Oh, that's awesome.
So yeah, it's just a beautiful, beautiful day. In fact, we walked out to U2's "It's a Beautiful Day," that song. We walked out to that. And I walked into "There Is a Redeemer," because that's the story. That's, in fact, Kim loves that. I'm sorry, Brad loves that passage. Let the redeemed tell their story. And that's what we want to do, is just tell the wonderful story of what God did in our lives.
It's, I didn't go into any details, but it's embarrassing to tell people, the worst thing you've ever done. It's, but I read that verse and said, let the redeemed of the Lord tell their story. I'm like, okay, I want to do this. But so we have shared the story in different small groups, and it's definitely brought us closer rather than because I was expecting people to just say, see ya, anything to do with you. And I didn't want to risk, Anne's relationships that she had developed, but she was willing. So we have shared, but that's another thing, this is kind of off topic, but to let yourself be vulnerable. If you want to get deep, if you want to have a relationship with somebody that goes beyond the surface, then you need to be vulnerable and share your mistakes, your failures, your sins. And it just doesn't happen very much. And I know there is a place for them. But, when you do that, people say, oh, you too?
Yeah.
Thought I was the only one. And it gives people hope, I think. Sometimes you feel like you're the only one that's done something or, have these doubts, and, how many times do you have a strong Christian or whatever in a small group say, well, I'm really doubting God. I really, I'm struggling. You just, at least in groups that we've been in, that's not common because you want people to think well of you, especially they want to think that you're a good Christian. Well, we're not all, great. We fall. God has purposes in and can use our failures, and God also has purpose in hardships. And so, just would encourage people to share those and go beyond the surface.
Thank you. So, where can people find y'all? Do y'all have, I know, Anne, you have a Facebook.
I'm on Facebook.
And they can buy your book on Amazon?
Yes, actually, that's kind of a long story, but yes, the book is Beauty from Ashes, Meditations on a Restored Marriage, and it's on Amazon. And I also sell it for probably a little less on a website, which is, oh yes, thank you, AnneMitchellWriting.com.
Cool.
AnneMitchellWriting.com. So yeah, so we love to share it, and of course that this has been long, but that goes into even more details.
Yes, ma'am. Well, thank y'all so much. I know that this is going to be so encouraging for people and give them hope. I know marriage is such, like, when my parents shared their story, it was like the testimony that people need to hear. We had so many comments and stuff, and so I know with y'all's, it's going to be so helpful for people, even if they don't admit that their marriage is struggling. I'm sure that there's a lot they can take away from this and grow in. So thank you for being vulnerable, and I will see y'all on the next episode.